In the early 1840s, in the quiet woods of what is now Latvia, then part of the Russian Empire, there stood a finishing school for girls of the upper class, the Pensionat Vanuelki. The school was known for its discipline, refinement, and discretion. It catered to daughters of the aristocracy, most of them between 13 and 17 years of age. It was the kind of place where reputation meant everything. But that school's reputation began to crumble after a new teacher arrived in the summer of 1845. Because according to 13 students and their families, this new woman had a habit of being in two places at once. Her name was Emilie Sagee, and the shadow she left behind still haunts one of the strangest and most unsettling mysteries ever recorded. Emilie Sagee was 32 years old when she arrived at the pensionnat in 1845. She was French, unmarried, well-educated, and according to every student who ever described her, kind, composed, and pleasant. She had light blue eyes, a very fair complexion, and chestnut hair. Emilie was a governess, the 19th century term for a private educator and guardian of sorts. She taught languages and etiquette, oversaw lessons, and guided students with a firm but kind hand. By all accounts, she was beloved, intelligent, graceful, and fiercely professional. But within weeks of her arrival, strange reports began to spread among the students. One girl, Julie von Guldenstube, reported seeing Emilie at the front of the classroom, writing on the chalkboard. Nothing unusual until she glanced over and saw Emilie sitting at her desk at the same time, silent and unmoving. Both figures mimicked each other's movements with eerie precision, except the second Emilie, what they would come to call her double, moved just a second behind. Soon, more students began to witness the same thing. During a sewing lesson in the parlor, Emilie stood at the front of the room, demonstrating embroidery stitches on a piece of linen. 20 girls sat around her. Then, as she began to assist one girl, her double appeared, standing beside her, mimicking her every move with a kind of delayed elegance. Emilie never noticed. She continued teaching, oblivious to the double who stood just inches from her own body. At first, the students thought it must be a trick of the light or their imagination, but it kept happening again and again. The incidents soon grew bolder. In one case, Emilie was seen walking through the school gardens, her pale blue dress fluttering in the breeze. A student in the classroom near the window pointed her out. But at that very moment, Emilie's double appeared inside the room, standing beside the teacher's chair. It was identical in form and in dress, but totally blank in expression. Two students, both daughters of noblemen, decided to test it, and bravely they approached the doppelganger and tried to touch it. Their hands passed through something, not air, but not solid, something dense and static. They reported feeling a mild resistance. On another occasion, a student saw Emilie in the garden trimming flowers. Moments later, when the student re-entered the school, she saw Emilie again standing at the blackboard, giving a lesson to a different class. The student rushed back out to the garden, and Emilie was still there, still clipping blossoms. These sightings continued for months. The school headmistress dismissed them as hysteria. But soon, so many students saw it, and so often, that parents began to worry. Some accused the school of harboring a witch. Others feared a form of contagious madness. Girls were pulled out, and complaints mounted, and after 18 months, just 12 of the original 42 students remained enrolled in the school. Eventually, the headmistress confronted Emilie directly, and Sagee was asked to resign from her position. To her credit, she didn't deny the events. She claimed she had no control over it, but did confess that it had followed her all of her life. In fact, she said, this was her 19th teaching position. She had been dismissed 18 times before, and always for the same reason. Emilie herself was never seen witnessing her double, but she grew increasingly pale and fatigued when it happened. When asked, she admitted that each time someone saw her double, she felt weak, drained, as though something had been taken from her. None of the accounts described the doppelganger speaking. It never interacted physically. It was always eerily still, silent, and completely devoid of expression. According to students, its clothing was always identical, but it appeared somewhat less vivid, much like a faded image or a figure in fog. Some described it as a phantom reflection. Nearly 15 years after these events, Julie von Guldenstube, one of the witnesses, recounted the events in a letter to American researcher Robert Dale Owen, and he published this account in his 1860 book, Footfalls on the Boundary of Another World, verifying her identity and noting the corroboration of multiple former students and their families. They had no real reason to lie. They were the daughters of wealthy families, now grown and scattered across Europe, but still reporting the same events with startling consistency. In fact, that student, Julie, who had originally brought the case to light, agreed to share it only under a pseudonym at first. But Owen, convinced of her sincerity, eventually persuaded her to allow her real name in print. Owen, a respected figure in his own right, concluded that Emilie Sagee's case was one of the clearest and most credible instances of doppelganger phenomena ever recorded. Modern psychologists either dismiss this story wholly, or suggest shared hallucination or mass suggestion, but many believe that this case stretches those explanations. These girls saw the double independently and described it identically, and in some cases even tried to touch it. Others suggest a phenomenon known as bilocation, the idea that Emilie's consciousness temporarily manifested itself elsewhere. The weakness she described might suggest a dissociative or psychosomatic condition. Or perhaps, as some spiritualists of the time believed, Emilie's double was a projection of a suppressed identity, an echo of her private mind that somehow became external. We don't know much about what happened to Emilie after leaving the school. We don't know if the doppelganger followed her elsewhere, and we also don't know if she ever taught again. We often imagine our greatest mysteries as things that live in the shadows, in the woods, in basements, the darkened corners of forgotten homes. But sometimes the strangest stories live in daylight, in the smooth order of a classroom, in the ticking rhythm of a daily routine. Emilie Sagee was never accused of any wrongdoing. She harmed no one. And yet, throughout her life, wherever she went, something followed. And in a place like Midnight Falls, it isn't always your absence that haunts people. Sometimes, it's your presence.